We are back on Inside Politics today. Our guests are Natalie Allison of the TENNESSEAN and Horan of NewsChannel 5. They've both been covering the recent session of the Tennessee General Assembly, which just concluded this week. Natalie, Governor Lee has been a supporter of many of the things that came out of the Tennessee General Assembly this time. He got his legislative package approved almost in total. He's been among the most conservative GOP governors across the country in terms of the coronavirus, mask mandates, and even on taking the COVID-19 vaccines. Has he done enough to make sure he doesn't have anybody running against him to his right in the GOP primary next year when he runs for re-election?
You know, I think it's unlikely that anyone would succeed at primarying Bill Lee. That I don't think it's out of the question that people will launch bids to do so. And I believe someone who isn't actually really involved in politics has already filed to run against him in that primary. But Bill Lee and his team, I think, have been operating with the threat of a primary challenge in mind. And I think for the most part, while they have gotten certainly on the governor's response, which some people would say was conservative, they have gotten a lot of pushback from very right-wing Republicans over the last year for the governor even giving counties authority to implement restrictions. But by and large, I do think his team has operated under the assumption that he could be primaried, and I do think he's going to be safe in that regard, yeah.
Kyle, Tennessee governors, since they've been allowed to seek a second four-year term, have not had any challenge in their party or much of a challenge in the general election. Do you think that'll be more of the same for Bill Lee, a pretty easy re-election next year, at least at this point it looks like?
I think if the only thing that he's going to have to worry about is a Democrat. I don't see anyone trying to come in. Maybe if he decides to step down, but I don't think that will happen. But in such a red state, I think that the Republicans are just going to try to continue with him.
Natalie, we talk about last-minute deals that happen in the legislature. One of those this year appears to be at least to do something about medical marijuana, which is legal in most states across the country. It looked like it was dead again this year, but then suddenly a bill got together very late and got passed. What does this new bill do, and does it do enough? A lot of people who were for it actually voted against this bill because they didn't think it went far enough.
Yeah, and there was a bill that went a little bit farther than this that actually picked up some momentum there at the end, to the surprise of a lot of people. Because that other bill got some momentum, I think the advocates for this, the sponsor for the bill that passed, were able to use that as leverage. So this bill effectively creates a medical marijuana commission in the state that is going to be tasked with coming up with ideas, proposals for how the state can implement a medical cannabis program when the federal government reclassifies the drug. And then it also, this is a concession to the pro-medical cannabis group who wanted it now. It also will decriminalize possession of low THC oil for people with 9 different illnesses that are spelled out in the law.
Kyle, it seemed that the growing support for this in the legislature came more on a personal basis. We had a number of lawmakers come up who said they've had family members who wanted to be able to use the medical marijuana to relieve pain and other things. That really made a difference, and you don't usually hear lawmakers talk about their personal lives and how that changes what they think about legislation.
Well, if you're in committee, you actually do hear a lot of people talking about how they've switched the way that they feel because they either have their own family members or friends of family members that they feel could benefit from this. And then, this particular law, even though they're calling it a medical cannabis law, I mean, the 0.9% THC is, I believe that's 3 times what is legally allowable for hemp oil in the state. And there was one condition that was already legalized for, which was epilepsy, and then there's 8 new ones in there. But I was talking to a woman who brings her son up there. She's been trying for 3 years. Her son's name is TJ. He has epilepsy, and she actually didn't know that she could get this oil for him, even because he has epilepsy. And I've just heard from her that she apparently has already ordered it and is trying to start that treatment with him, because this is something that she believes in deeply.
Natalie, lawmakers in Tennessee are usually very tough on crime and on the death penalty, but in this particular case, they actually changed the law in terms of death penalty appeals to allow for developmentally disabled people to make that appeal. That may have an impact on a death row inmate who's waiting to find out what his execution date is.
Yeah, that's one that now the Tennessee Supreme Court has, it could at any time set a date for. It is one that I think the governor is examining, and so far the governor hasn't intervened in any of the executions, and so we'll see what happens with that one. But yeah, that is a victory for people who have been advocating for Purvis Payne to have his case reconsidered.
Kyle, even as unemployment remains at elevated levels across the country and here in Tennessee, the lawmakers just in the recent days cut the number of, or the amount of unemployment assistance, the weeks they get and the amount of money they get. It's now the lowest in the nation. What are they thinking? Don't come to Tennessee and be unemployed?
Well, it's down to 12 weeks. And I know what the governor is thinking is that there are lots of jobs available in the state, and there are fewer people than the total number of jobs, is what he would say, that are unemployed. And, you know, I've talked to people on both sides of this issue. And I mean, there are people who say that they're not qualified to do a lot of these other positions. And then there are tons of business owners, especially here in Nashville, who say that they cannot find people to fill their positions. And these were positions that were filled before the pandemic. So I think that's kind of where you're seeing the two sides clash here, and that's probably why the bill was passed.
Natalie, a final question for you. Your paper and lots of people across the state have been critical of the state for not using hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds to help Tennessee families. Some GOP lawmakers finally got something about that in the budget this year. What difference will that make? Does that mean they're going to start spending this money on a regular basis?
Yeah, so this is about a year and a half after this first came to light, and the Tennessean began covering it extensively. And as you all may recall, initially the governor, Republican leadership said, no, we don't think anything needs to happen with this money. So it is, it's pretty significant that this year the legislative session included passing a bill to spend down much of that $700+ million reserve. They've outlined some new programs that that money is going to be going to nonprofits in many ways. There will be a slight increase in cash benefits for families. Democrats, of course, are saying the program isn't as it could be. They could be giving more direct aid to families, but this is a significant step for a state that had amassed the largest TANF reserve in the country.
Kyle, and final for you, I suspect you, as much as hectic as it is in the last couple of weeks, you wouldn't want the legislature to be like most states and decide they're not going to be in session at all, or be in session all year.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it would be as hectic if it was all year round. They wouldn't feel like they have to rush through certain pieces of legislation. Maybe the conversations would be slower and right, well thought out.
We'll have to leave it at that, Kyle. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Many more questions? Natalie Allison, thank you so much for joining us. Kyle Horan, thanks for what you do in the legislature, and we'll have you back here soon. Thank you. That's Inside Politics for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you'll be here for a future show. Goodbye.